Hello, I'm Todd Sink, and I'm a Fisheries Extension Specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Services. Today we're going to be demonstrating a wide variety of recipes that you can use to cook fish. We know that oftentimes once you catch a fish and clean it, cooking it can be intimidating to many people. Most often it's just because they don't know the proper way to cook fish, or they just are not sure what recipes to use. Today we're going to cover some really inexpensive recipes that can be used to throw together a quick dinner for you and your family in under 35 to 40 minutes. And in most of these situations, the recipes we'll be demonstrating today all cost around less than $10 for a family of 4. The first recipe we'll be covering today is the old Southern classic. We're going to make some fried fish. And the ingredients you'll need for this are really simple and they're not very expensive. First you'll need some yellow cornmeal, some flour, salt and pepper, some cayenne pepper if you like it a little bit spicier, and just a little bit of common table sugar. Alright, to begin with our fried catfish, this recipe is really simple. It's really just a proportional recipe, but we'll be using a measuring cup today just out of convenience. What you'll need to mix is about 1/2 part cornmeal to 1 part of flour. Mix those in your bag. Add salt, which we're using coarse sea salt today, and ground black pepper to your taste or your family's taste. For those of you that like a little bit of spice to your fish, fried catfish, we'll add a little bit of cayenne pepper here. And finally, we're actually going to add just a little bit of regular table sugar. Now this is an unusual ingredient to add for most people, but what it does is when it hits the hot oil, it actually caramelizes and helps get a nice golden batter that holds in place really well. And all we do once we have our ingredients, we're going to shake them up in our bag, and then it's going to be time to add our fish. Once we have our breading all made up, we're ready for our fish. And today we're going to be making some of our channel catfish that we had previously caught and cleaned, and we've vacuum sealed them here. And so what you do is you take a couple of your catfish fillets out. They need to be fairly well thawed. In this case you still see they're good and flexible. They do have a little ice on them, but they're fairly well thawed. And don't worry about blotting them off. Make sure they're good and wet. That's how they pick up the seasoning and coating. So we're going to drop a few of these fillets straight into our bag. We're going to make sure the bag is sealed very well. You definitely want to make sure it's sealed well before you begin shaking. And all you're going to do is turn the bag back and forth a couple times. Make sure they get coated real well with that seasoning. And after you're done, you should end up with catfish fillets that are evenly covered in your seasoning. Once we have our catfish breaded and ready to go, we're going to want to make sure that we have our frying oil good and hot. This is just a standard $40 deep fryer that you can pick up at most big box stores, and we're going to cook our fish today at 375. And what we do is in our basket, we're going to take some of our fish fillets that we got breaded up here. We're going to shake off the excess breading in the bag. We're going to lay them out in our fry basket. Once we've loaded enough fillets into our fry basket, we're going to slowly lower them into the oil so it doesn't splash. And then we're going to cover our fish fillets. So one good way to indicate that they're done is when they begin to start coming to the top, like we're seeing here. We're starting to see some floating and they're good and golden brown. We know that our fish fillets are done here. So we're going to lift those up out of the basket. They're nice golden brown colored. And we're going to just set them there to drain for 1 second. Once we have that excess oil drained off, we're simply going to shake them off a little bit, and we're going to lay them out on some paper towel to absorb that excess oil. To go along with our fried catfish, I'm going to show you how to make a side at home. I'm going to show you how to make your own tartar sauce quickly and easily. To make some tartar sauce, all we need is some mayonnaise, we need some pickle relish, we need some lemon juice. You can either use fresh squeeze like this, just make sure you don't get any seeds in there, or you can use the concentrate from the store. And if you like it a little bit spicier, you can use a little bit of cayenne pepper. Now just mix this up real thoroughly, blend it all together real well. And you have a homemade spicy tartar sauce. For our next recipe, we're going to be making another fried catfish dish. In this case, we're going to be making a beer battered catfish sandwich. And what you're going to need for that is, of course, your catfish. You can use a standard box of fish fry. It does not have to be a beer battered fish fry. But in this case, we're just going to use our leftover seasoning from our last recipe. You can turn this into a beer batter real easily. You're also going to need some buns for your sandwich. And you're going to need your choice of toppings. In this case, we're going to use some lettuce, tomato, and onion. And you're also going to want some citrus. It can be either lemon or lime. I prefer limes to season our beer batter with. Okay, for our batter here, we're going to use our leftover seasoning. And we want to put a fairly good amount into our bowl here. We're going to take our freshly cut limes, or you can use lime juice concentrate. We're going to squeeze it in here, and this flavor actually will really come through with the beer. And after we've squeezed our lime, we're going to start to mix in our beer. And we want to mix in a little bit at a time and start folding in our batter. And it's actually the foaming action from the carbonation in the beer that's going to give our batter its nice airy consistency. And we're looking for a slightly runny, non-clumpy consistency in our batter. And now we're starting to get that nice, smooth consistency. We don't want it terribly runny. And as some of these ingredients kind of rehydrate, it will kind of soak up and thicken that batter a little bit. And so now that we've got a decent consistency going on, we'll go ahead and set this batter aside for a minute. One thing that people often overlook and that makes it turn out not so great is when we're doing a beer batter, we actually want to dry our fish off. And the reason we dry our fish off is because they already have a lot of water on them, and if you add that to the batter, it tends to slide right off the fish. So we're just going to lay it out here on some paper towel, fold it over, and we're going to blot the fish really good. Now that our fish is drier, this is also a very good time if you want to add any additional seasonings that they will stick really good to the fish right now. But what we're going to do with these dry fillets is we're going to take and we're going to dredge them through the batter. So we're going to place it in, we're going to take a fork, and we're actually going to work the fillet down into the batter. And we'll take the next one, place down into the batter. Make sure they get nice and coated. Alright, we still have our oil good and hot here. And unlike our last recipe where we placed our fillets in the basket, we're going to pick up our fillets, we're going to make sure they're nice and coated, and we lower them slowly into the oil. And the reason for that, if we drop them quickly, they'll stick to our basket, and that breading won't puff up as much. For our next recipe, we'll be making a Parmesan and Romano crusted largemouth bass. Here we have some largemouth bass fillet chunks that we have already pre-cut. And for this recipe, you'll need some salt and pepper. You'll need some type of Italian seasoning. Here we have a Tuscan style Italian seasoning. Parmesan and Romano cheese. And either some spray olive oil or some regular olive oil. You also need some aluminum foil and a baking pan. Alright, to start with, we need to spray some olive oil on our aluminum lined pan or apply some regular olive oil. This ensures that our fish doesn't stick. And then we're going to want to space our fish evenly on our aluminum foil. Make sure that they all get cooked the same amount. Next thing, we're going to salt. And I always like to pour the salt in my hand, because once you over salt, you can't take it back. So it's better to go ahead and put it in your hand so that you can apply exactly the amount, and we make sure we don't have any spills on our tray. Next, we'll add a little bit of pepper. This step you can skip if you don't really want the pepper with it. I like to go just very, very lightly. Our next step is our Italian seasoning. And you can go light or heavy on this. It's really the cheeses that are going to be the star of this recipe. So you can even take and rub around some of the seasoning to get it in the right spot. But last and not least, we're going to heavily put Parmesan cheese. As a matter of fact, I'm going to open the other side here, and we're going to coat this pretty heavily. Because when this bakes, this harder cheese is going to develop a nice brown hard crust on it. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of our olive oil spray, And from a distance, so we don't blow our cheese everywhere, we're going to give that a light coat. And now it's ready for the oven, which our oven just beeped, letting us know it's ready. And we're going to place it into an oven at 400 degrees. And place that on the top shelf of the oven. And after 10 to 12 minutes, your Parmesan crusted largemouth bass should be ready to come out of the oven. Our next recipe that we're going to make has very few ingredients, as you can tell. We're going to be making a blackened bluegill with dirty red beans and rice. And for this, we're going to need any Cajun or blackened seasoning, some regular butter, and to speed along the process, for those of you like me that have to make meals for my family in a hurry, we're just going to use some red beans and rice, one of the instant rice mixes that you can microwave very quickly. The first thing you want to do is we've already started melting our butter in a large skillet over medium-high heat. While that butter is melting, what you want to do is take your Cajun seasoning and definitely give a thorough coating to all your fish. We're then going to want to go ahead and flip it over and make sure that we get both sides coated real well. Now your fish is ready to cook. And so now we're ready to add our fish to the warm butter. And we want to be very careful when we're adding our fish to make sure that the butter doesn't splatter up on us. And then after we add the fish, we want to turn the temperature up to high, and then we want to cover our fish. We've cooked for a while. We're going to want to take and turn our fish, and we're starting to get some of that blackening going. We'll make sure that we turn every piece. And now some people vary in the amount of blackening that they like. You can make your own judgment call on how blackened you like it. And then there's even some that will go back at this point and add more Cajun seasoning to the fish. But we're about halfway done there, so we're going to cover this back up to continue cooking. So our blackened fish is about done now, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to take it out and we're going to place it out on some paper towel to go ahead and soak up some of that excess butter before we plate it with our red beans and dirty rice. Alright, our next dish is also quite simple. It requires very few ingredients. We're going to make a simple grilled fish. And for this, we're going to use some crappie fillets, and we're going to use some tilapia fillets. And most people don't think of tilapia as a common pond species, but we do stock them commonly in Texas as a bass forage species and also to help control aquatic vegetation. We can also eat them readily as another species from our pond to consume. So for this recipe, all you're going to need is some olive oil or some olive oil spray, salt and pepper again, a simple bottle of Italian dressing. It can be any of your choosing. And this is an optional ingredient. You can have a little bit of liquid smoke. If you use a charcoal fire, it's going to impart some of the smoke on its own. If you're using a gas grill, you may choose to use some liquid smoke to add a little bit of flavor to your fish. And so to start with our grilled fish, we're just going to begin by seasoning it a little bit. We're going to start with a little salt, and like I said, I like to add it by hand to make sure that we don't add too much. Once again, we're using a coarse sea salt. Pepper to taste. You may choose to use or not to use pepper. We're just going to do real lightly. And today we are using a charcoal grill, but we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of liquid smoke to about half our crappie and half our tilapia. And the thing is, with liquid smoke, you always want to add it before you cook because liquid smoke can impart a little bit of a bitter flavor. So we're going to add that in, and it will kind of help cook out that bitterness while it grills. And we don't want to add it too heavy. Just a few drops here and there will do it. Now, our Italian seasoning, you can either add it now and let it marinate for 30 minutes, or you can add it on the grill. Today we're going to add it while the fish is on the grill. And so we're going to brush our Italian dressing around a little bit, make sure we're good and covered. Then we're simply going to take and lay our fish out on the grill. And these are very thin fillets. Tilapia, or at least small tilapia, and crappie have very thin fillets. So they're going to cook pretty quickly here on the grill. Now that we have all of our fillets out, we're going to coat them all with a little bit of Italian dressing. And it's not so much of an issue while you're grilling with a charcoal grill, but if you're grilling with a gas grill, you really want to watch for flare-ups while you're using Italian dressing, because the oils can cause flare-up fires. And so we're going to go ahead and cover that and let that cook for a while. Okay, so our fish has been cooking for about 10 minutes now, and it should be about ready to come off the grill. You kind of want to check and make sure that it flakes easily, which we do see that. And so we're ready to go ahead and take this off our grill. The next dish we're going to make is a simple broiled catfish. This is a much healthier option along with grilled fish than some of the deep frying methods. In order to make this dish, all we're going to need are some larger catfish fillets. We want a thicker fillet so it retains the moisture while you're cooking it. We'll need some lemons and some limes, salt and pepper, a little bit of basil leaves, and some olive oil. Okay, for this recipe, first we're going to start by adding some olive oil to our aluminum foil lined pan. We're going to brush this around. This is going to keep our fish from sticking during the boiling process. We don't want to go too heavy on the oil though, or it could create some smoke during the broiling since we're cooking it at high temperature very quickly. Next, we're going to simply lay out our catfish fillets. Like I said, larger fillets work best for this. That way they can maintain some moisture as they cook rapidly. Next, we're simply going to, once again, salt and pepper to flavor to taste. Add a little pepper. Next, we're going to add a few basil leaves. Sprinkle on a little bit of basil, not much. This is just regular dried basil. Next, we're going to squeeze some fresh citrus. And the citrus you use doesn't really matter. You can use combinations of oranges, mandarin oranges. You can use lemon, lime. Citrus pairs really well with fish, especially when you're doing a broil or a bake. So we've got some lime on there. I'll put some lemon on here next. Make sure we get those seeds off the fillets. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and put a few of these slices of citrus onto our fish. And what this is going to do is as it broils, it's going to keep some moisture in the fish, but it's also going to allow some of these citrus flavors to percolate down through the fish as it cooks. I like to save these little end pieces for the tail sections because they tend to be a little thinner. That way we make sure they don't dry out and become crispy. Our prepared catfish fillets in the oven at a low broil. So the next dish we're going to make is some simple smoked fish. And what we have here are some hybrid striped bass, which are becoming more and more popular for stocking in ponds, especially largemouth and bluegill ponds, where they serve as an additional sport fish to catch. You'll notice the bright orange fillet, it's a piece of salmon. And of course, we don't think of that as a normal sport fish that we would catch around here. But there are several people that will travel and people in other parts of the country that catch trout and salmon. And so we're going to smoke us a piece of salmon here along with our dish. And so our ingredients that we're going to use are just very simple: some salt, some pepper, and we're going to use some spray olive oil. The spray olive oil is not actually for the fish, it's actually for the grill, just to keep it from sticking. So for this dish, we're smoking some fish. And what we want is a moderately hot grill. We do not want a lot of really white hot coals out here. And next, we're going to take a good healthy dose of wood chips that we've been soaking in a bucket overnight. We're going to add these directly on top of the coals. This is going to help to cool the coals down a little bit as well. It's also going to generate lots of good smoke. Then we're going to take our olive oil spray, and be careful because this can flare up on the grill. But we need to coat the grill really well so that our smoked fish doesn't stick. First, we're going to lay out a little bit of our salmon. And then we're going to lay out some of our hybrid striped bass. Next, we're going to add a little bit of salt, especially to our salmon. Pepper to flavor. Then we're going to close this up and let this smoke for a while. Real quick, while our fish is smoking, we're going to show you how to make a simple cream seafood sauce to cover your smoked fish. Now this is very simple. It's just some cream cheese, some half and half cream, a simple can of crab. These are less than $2, and a little bit of cayenne pepper. Okay, so over low heat, we're going to take 1 block of cream cheese, add that in. We're going to add about a half a cup of half and half. We're going to go ahead and mix in our cayenne pepper. And then finally, we're going to mix in our can of crab meat. Then we're going to slowly blend this until it all melts together. Alright, so our fish has been smoking for about an hour here now. I'm going to go ahead and pull our salmon off here. Pull our striped bass off. Our final dish of the day is also going to be a very simple one. Now that we've smoked some of our salmon, or you can use other fish such as the striped bass, we're going to make a very simple smoked fish dip. And so for this, we're going to use a piece of our smoked salmon. We're going to use some cream cheese. We're going to use some seasoned salt. You can also add onion powder and garlic powder if you so desire. And then we're going to use some simple sharp shredded cheese at the end. And there's 2 different ways you can make this. You can simply make it in the microwave, which I oftentimes do, but today we're going to make it on the stovetop in a pot. Okay, in our pot, I'm going to go ahead and add 2 blocks of cream cheese. Then we're going to go ahead and add about 3/4 of a pound of smoked salmon. We're going to season salt to taste. And like I said before, you can add a little bit of onion salt or a little bit of garlic salt. We're going to add just a little bit of garlic salt there. And now we're going to heat all this up and we're going to stir it until it's consistent. Now that our cheese and our salmon is well blended and melted together, we'll pour it into a bowl. And we'll let it sit there for just a few minutes. And before it forms a solid consistency, we'll add in some shredded sharp cheddar cheese. So after our dip is set up and cooled a little bit, we're going to go ahead and add about a cup of sharp shredded cheddar cheese. And we're just going to go ahead and mix that in. We want to make sure that we do this after it cools, because the goal is not to have the cheddar cheese melt. It just needs to be mixed in.
This video was funded in part by a grant from the National Institute of Food and Agriculture Renewable Resource Extension Act, administered by the Texas A&M Institute of Renewable Natural Resources. Brought to you by Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Services. Todd Sink, Assistant Professor, Department of Wildlife and Fisheries Science, Extension Fisheries Specialist, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Texas A&M University, and Michaela House, A&M undergraduate videographer.